The galaxy had always thought humans were weak. For 300 years, humanity had traveled among the stars. They built small colonies on distant worlds. They traded goods with alien species. They signed peace treaties and attended diplomatic meetings. And through all of it, they smiled and nodded and never raised their voices. The other species watched them and laughed. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the patrol ship Gentle Wind and looked out at the stars. She was 52 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and lines around her eyes from years of service. Her uniform was simple and plain, just like every other human military uniform. Nothing fancy, nothing threatening. That was the point. She commanded humanity's entire visible fleet, 40 patrol ships, old ones, slow ones, ships that other species would call embarrassing. The hegemony had 800 warships in their main fleet alone. The Dominion had thousands. Even the peaceful collective had more military power than humanity showed to the galaxy. "Admiral," said her second officer, a young man named Lee, "we have received another message from Earth Command." Did not turn around, read it. They have attacked another colony, mining station 7 on its belt, 43 dead. Closed her eyes for a moment. 43 more names to add to the list. 43 more families who would never see their loved ones again. They had been doing this for months now. Small attacks, quick raids. They would strike human colonies, kill civilians, and then disappear before anyone could respond. And humanity did nothing. That was what the galaxy saw anyway. "Send our condolences to the families," said quietly, "and file another protest with the Galactic Assembly." Hesitated. She could feel his frustration without even looking at him. He was young. He still believed that justice should be swift and powerful. "Admiral," he said carefully, "the Assembly will do nothing. They never do. No, we cannot fight back. Everyone knows." Finally turned to face him. Her expression was calm, almost sad. "Do they?" she asked. Before could answer, she walked past him toward her private quarters. Some secrets were too heavy to share, even with her own crew. 3,000 light-years away, on a planet called Prime, Admiral stood before his Emperor and smiled with all 3 of his mouths. "The humans filed another protest," he announced. The court laughed. It was a wet, gurgling sound that echoed through the throne room. They sent strongly worded messages. They demanded justice. They asked the Assembly for help. The Emperor leaned forward on his throne. He was massive, even for a. His scales were dark purple, and his 4 eyes gleamed with cruel intelligence. "And what did the Assembly say?" the Emperor asked. "Nothing, my lord, as always. The humans have no allies, no real military, no value to anyone," spread his clawed hands wide. "They are prey animals pretending to be people. I recommend we take their entire territory, their colonies, all of it." The Emperor considered this. The other species might object. "They will not. Humanity has nothing anyone wants. They are weak, pathetic creatures who talk about peace while their children die." Smile grew wider. "Give me the order, my lord. I will crush them within a single rotation of their sun." The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Do it. Show the galaxy what happens to species who are too weak to defend themselves." On Earth, in a bunker buried 3 kilometers beneath the mountains, General Shin sat alone in a dark room. He was 67 years old. He had served in the military for 45 of those years, but no one in the galaxy knew his name. No one knew this bunker existed. No one knew about the screens in front of him, showing maps and numbers that would make any other species faint with terror. 300 years ago, humanity had left Earth for the first time. They had found a galaxy full of predators, species that conquered and enslaved, empires built on blood and suffering, wars that lasted centuries and killed billions. The humans who led that first expedition made a choice. They would not become conquerors. They would not build weapons that other species could see and fear. They would smile and trade and talk about peace. But they would also prepare. Looked at the screen showing Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. On the surface, it looked like nothing but ice and rock. But beneath that ice, hidden in vast underground caverns, sat a fleet of 4,000 warships. They had been built in secret over 150 years. Not one of them had ever been seen by alien eyes. He switched to another screen. Mars. The red planet looked dead and empty from space, but its core had been hollowed out decades ago. Inside sat 3 mobile battle stations, each one the size of a small moon, each one carrying enough weapons to destroy an entire enemy fleet by itself. Another screen, the asteroid belt, 200,000 combat drones, each one connected to a central network waiting to wake up. They could move as one, think as one, strike as one. And finally, the screen he looked at most often, Saturn's rings. Hidden among the ice and rock was humanity's greatest secret, a ship called the Unspoken, 12 kilometers long, 80 years to build. It carried a weapon that could erase moons from existence. Had spent his entire life building this hidden military. He had watched his hair turn gray and his body grow old, all while preparing for a day he hoped would never come. His communication device beeped. He pressed a button, and the face of Ambassador appeared on screen. General said, his voice was tight with controlled emotion. They have launched their main fleet, 800 ships. They are heading for Sol. Felt his heart grow heavy. Civilian casualties. They hit New Colony first. As a message, paused, his jaw tightened. 12,000 dead, including the school district. They targeted children on purpose. The room seemed to grow colder. 12,000 children. For 300 years, humanity had played weak. They had smiled while other species mocked them. They had filed protests while their people died. They had waited and prepared and hoped that this moment would never arrive. But it had arrived. "What are your orders?" asked. Stood up slowly. His old bones ached, but his mind was sharp and clear. "Contact Admiral. Tell her to initiate Condition Black." He paused, feeling the weight of 3 centuries pressing down on his shoulders. It is time for the galaxy to learn the truth about humanity. He reached for the console and entered a code that had not been used in 200 years. Across the solar system, hidden machines began to wake. Sleeping fleets stirred in their dark harbors. Weapons that had waited patiently for generations started their power-up sequences. The thought humanity was prey. They were about to learn how wrong they were. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The fleet entered the Sol system like a dark cloud. 800 warships, each one bristling with weapons, each one painted with the symbols of conquest. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Hunger, and watched Earth grow larger on his. "Scan for enemy vessels," he ordered. His tactical officer worked the controls. A few moments later, he looked up with confusion. "Admiral, I am detecting 40 ships, old patrol vessels. They are holding position near the 4th planet." Laughed. It was a harsh, cruel sound. 40 ships against 800. Is this a joke? "It appears to be their entire fleet, Admiral." Pathetic, settled back into his command chair. "Open a channel. I want to speak to their leader." The flickered Admiral Park's face appeared. She looked calm, almost bored. "This is Admiral Park of the Earth Defense Fleet. You are entering protected space. Please state your intentions." Leaned forward. My intentions are to burn your pathetic fleet, to conquer to enslave your species. Those are my intentions, human." Did not react. Her expression remained perfectly still. "I see, and you believe 800 ships will be enough for this task." Blinked all 4 of his eyes. "Enough. I could conquer you with half this fleet, with a quarter of it. Your 40 old ships are nothing but garbage." Perhaps, tilted her head slightly. "But these 40 ships are not our fleet, Admiral. They are just what we let you see." Before could respond, ended the transmission. What did she mean by that? His tactical officer asked nervously. Nothing, lies desperation, waved a clawed hand. All ships advance to attack formation, destroy their fleet and proceed to Earth. Today humanity dies. The fleet moved forward, their weapons powered up, their shields activated. They were ready for battle. They were not ready for what happened next. Captain Myra Song stood on the bridge of the Silent Promise, hidden beneath Europa's ice. Her ship was dark and quiet. It had been dark and quiet for 15 years, waiting for this moment. Around her the crew worked in silence. They had trained for this day. They had dreamed about it, feared it, prepared for it. Now it was here. Her communication device crackled. Admiral's voice came through, calm and steady. All Hidden Fleet Commanders, this is Admiral Park. Authorization code Gamma 77. Activate Protocol Genesis. Myra felt a chill run down her spine. She turned to her crew. You heard the Admiral. Wake up the fleet. On Europa, beneath kilometers of ice, lights began to turn on. Engines that had been cold for decades started to hum. Thousands of ships, black and sleek and deadly, stirred from their long sleep. On Mars, the ground itself began to shake. Massive doors, disguised as natural rock formations, slowly opened. 3 enormous structures rose from the planet's hollow core. They were not ships. They were mobile battle stations, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a small moon. In the asteroid belt, 200,000 small objects suddenly came to life. Combat drones, each one the size of a small house, connected to each other through quantum networks. They formed swarms, then clouds, then storms of mechanical death. And near Saturn, hidden among the rings, something ancient and terrible began to move. The Unspoken powered up its engines for the first time in 20 years. 12 kilometers of pure destruction, built in absolute secrecy, carrying humanity's darkest and most powerful weapon. Commander Lee sat in a special chair aboard the Silent Promise. Wires connected his brain directly to the drone network. When he closed his eyes, he could feel them all. 200,000 drones, 200,000 extensions of his will. Connection established, he reported. The swarm is ready. Captain Myra nodded. Take us up, all ships rise. On the bridge of the Eternal Hunger, alarms suddenly screamed to life. Jumped from his chair. What is happening? Report. His tactical officer was staring at his screen with something that looked like terror. His clawed hands were shaking. Admiral, I do not understand. Show me. The main switched to a tactical display. Felt his blood turn cold. Ships were appearing everywhere. Not tens of ships, not hundreds, thousands. They emerged from Europa's ice like ghosts rising from graves. They rose from Mars like nightmares taking form. They swarmed from the asteroid belt like angry insects. And from Saturn's rings, something massive was approaching. Something his sensors could barely comprehend. How many? Whispered. 4,000 capital ships from Europa, 3 mobile battle stations from Mars, 200,000 combat drones from the asteroid belt. The tactical officer's voice cracked. And 1 vessel from Saturn, that is. Admiral, it is 12 kilometers long. Our weapons cannot even scratch something that size. Stumbled backward, his legs felt weak. This was impossible. Humanity had no military, everyone knew that. The galaxy had laughed at them for centuries. Contact he ordered. Tell them we need reinforcements. Admiral, we cannot win this battle. Even with our entire species fleet, we cannot win this. Then what do we do? Before anyone could answer, the flickered. Admiral Park appeared again. But this time she was not on an old patrol ship. She was on the bridge of something much larger, much more dangerous. Admiral, she said calmly, you asked earlier if 800 ships would be enough. I believe you now have your answer. Mouths opened and closed, but no sound came out. Your species attacked our colonies, continued. You killed our civilians. You murdered our children. You thought we were weak because we chose peace. Her eyes hardened. We are not weak. We never were. We simply chose not to show you our strength. What are you? Managed to ask. We are humanity. We are what happens when a peaceful species prepares for 300 years of war. Leaned forward. You have one chance, Admiral. Surrender now. Turn your ships around and leave our space. If you do not, I will demonstrate exactly what we are capable of. Looked at his tactical display. Thousands of human ships surrounded his fleet. The drones were moving into position. The massive vessel from Saturn was getting closer. His 800 ships suddenly looked very, very small. His emperor had ordered him to conquer Earth. His honor demanded he fight. But was not stupid. He knew death when he saw it. I need to contact my emperor, he stammered. I need time. You have 1 hour, said. After that, we will consider your presence in our space an act of war, and we will respond accordingly. The transmission ended. Collapsed into his chair. Around him, his crew stared at their screens in horror. The fleet that was supposed to conquer humanity was now surrounded, trapped, helpless. And somewhere in the cold darkness of space, the sleeping giant had finally awakened. Humanity was no longer pretending. The galaxy was about to learn what that meant. 1 hour passed, then 2. The Emperor did not respond. Admiral paced the bridge of his flagship like a trapped animal. His crew watched him nervously. Every few minutes he would look at the tactical display, hoping the human ships had disappeared. They had not. If anything, more had arrived. Still no word from them, he asked. Nothing, Admiral. Our messages are being received, but there is no response. Knew what that meant. The Emperor was abandoning him. If won, the Emperor would take credit. If died, the Emperor would blame him for the failure. That was the way. Admiral, his tactical officer said quietly, the human deadline has passed. What are your orders? Looked at his fleet. 800 ships filled with warriors. They had families back home. They had dreams and hopes, and they were all going to die because their emperor was too proud to negotiate. But was also, and did not surrender. All ships, he said finally, attack. Captain Myra Song watched the fleet begin its advance. They are firing, her tactical officer reported. All 800 ships moving into attack formation. Myra felt a strange sadness. She had hoped they would surrender. She had hoped there would be no more death today. But hope, she had learned, was often disappointed. Commander, she said, release the swarm. Lee closed his eyes. Through his neural connection, he became something more than human. He was 200,000 minds at once, 200,000 weapons moving as one. The drone swarm launched. On the flagship, alarms screamed. The tactical officer shouted in panic. Admiral, the small units, they are moving too fast. Our targeting systems cannot track them. The drones hit the fleet like a wave hitting sand. They were small, but there were so many of them. Each one carried cutting lasers and explosive charges. They did not fight like ships. They fought like insects, swarming over enemy vessels, finding weak points, tearing them apart piece by piece. I need damage reports, screamed. We have lost 12 ships, no 20, no, the tactical officer stopped. His voice became hollow. We are losing ships faster than I can count. The fired back. Their weapons were powerful, designed to destroy large warships. But the drones were too small, too fast, too many. For every drone they killed, 10 more took its place. Then the human capital ships joined the battle. They moved in perfect formation, 4,000 vessels working together like parts of one machine. Their weapons were strange, not normal lasers or missiles. They fired beams of compressed light that seemed to ignore shields entirely. Our shields are not working, a captain screamed over the fleet communication channel. Their weapons are going right through. Impossible, shouted. Shields always work, that is basic physics. But the humans had spent 300 years developing weapons specifically designed to defeat every known shield technology. They had studied every species' defenses. They had found every weakness. They had built counters to everything. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 14 minutes. 612 ships were destroyed. 188 surrendered. Not a single human vessel was lost. Watched his fleet die around him. He watched ships he had commanded for years explode into dust. He watched warriors he had known since childhood burn in the cold vacuum of space. When it was over, he stood alone on his bridge. Most of his crew was dead. His ship was crippled, drifting without power. Admiral's voice came through the emergency channel. "Your fleet is destroyed. Will you surrender?" Wanted to refuse. He wanted to die fighting like a true warrior. But then he thought about the survivors on the ships that had surrendered. They were his responsibility. He could not let them die for his pride. "I surrender," he said quietly. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. The battle was over, but the demonstration was just beginning. On Earth, General sat in his command bunker, watching reports come in from every corner of the galaxy. The other species had seen the battle. They had watched 800 ships get destroyed in 14 minutes. They were scared. But they were not scared enough. Pressed a button on his console. "Admiral, proceed with Phase 2. His voice came back, calm but heavy. "Understood, General. May history forgive us for what we are about to do." On the bridge of the Unspoken, Lieutenant Jinnah monitored communications from across the galaxy. Every species was watching. Every government was recording. This moment would be remembered for 1,000 years. "Target acquired," the weapons officer reported. "Prime's largest moon. 0 population, 0 strategic value, it is just rock." "Perfect," Admiral said. "Charge the primary weapon." The Unspoken carried a weapon that should not exist. A collapsing singularity cannon. It created a tiny black hole, fed it matter, and then released the compressed energy in one focused beam. The physics behind it were almost magical. The destructive power was almost godlike. "Weapon charged," the weapons officer announced. "Ready to fire on your command." Looked at the moon hung in space, a dead rock orbiting a world of enemies. After today, it would no longer exist. "Send a message to Prime," she ordered. "Tell them to watch their sky." The message was sent. On Prime, millions of creatures looked up at their largest moon. They did not know what was coming. They only knew that the humans had told them to watch. "Fire," said. A beam of pure white light shot from the Unspoken. It crossed the distance to the moon in seconds. When it hit, there was no explosion, no debris, no dust. The moon simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there. The next moment, there was only empty space where it had been. On Prime, the night sky changed forever. The familiar shape of their largest moon was gone. Millions of screamed. Children cried. Religious leaders fell to their knees and prayed to gods who could not protect them. Lieutenant Jinnah reported from her station. "We are receiving transmissions from Prime, military channels, civilian broadcasts. Everything is going crazy. They are terrified, Admiral." "What are they saying?" Jinnah listened for a moment. Her face was pale. "They are begging, crying, asking for mercy, asking what they did to deserve this." She paused. "High Command has issued an unconditional surrender. They are offering full reparations for the colonies they attacked. They want peace." Admiral nodded slowly. She felt no joy, only a deep, heavy sadness. "Accept their surrender, and send this message to every species in the galaxy." She took a breath and spoke the words that would change history. "This is Admiral Park of the Earth Defense Fleet. What you have witnessed today was not an act of war. It was a demonstration. For 300 years, humanity chose peace. We chose diplomacy. We chose kindness. And the galaxy responded with contempt, with violence, with the murder of our children." Her voice hardened. "No more. From this day forward, any species that attacks human civilians will face the full power of what we have become. We do not seek conquest. We do not want war, but we will no longer allow our people to die while we smile and file protests." She paused. "The galaxy thought we were weak. The galaxy was wrong. Remember this day, remember what we can do, and choose your actions carefully." The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, governments trembled. Military leaders rewrote their strategies. Empires that had planned to expand into human territory quietly abandoned those plans. The sleeping giant had not just awakened. It had shown the galaxy why it should never have been disturbed. The recording spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every species saw it. Every government watched it again and again. The hidden human fleet rising from its secret bases, the battle that lasted 14 minutes, the moon that disappeared in a flash of white light. On 100 different worlds, leaders gathered in emergency meetings. They asked the same question over and over. How did we not know? Ambassador stood before the Galactic Assembly 3 days after the battle. The Great Chamber was filled with representatives from 12 major species. Normally, they spoke loudly and argued constantly. Today, they were silent. Walked slowly to the center podium. He was a small man by human standards, thin, quiet, the kind of person you might overlook in a crowd. He had served as humanity's voice in the assembly for 20 years. In all that time, the other delegates had ignored him, mocked him, and sometimes forgotten he was even there. They were not ignoring him now. Honored delegates began. "I know you have questions. I will answer them honestly." The chamber remained silent. Finally, the Assembly Prime spoke. She was a member of the collective, a species of crystalline beings who valued logic above all else. Her body was made of beautiful blue crystal that chimed softly when she moved. "Ambassador," she said, her voice was shaking. "How long has humanity possessed this military capability?" Considered the question. The first hidden shipyards were built 240 years ago. The weapon that destroyed the moon was completed 80 years ago. We have been preparing for this moment for most of our time among the stars. A murmur ran through the chamber. 240 years, nearly as long as humanity had been a spacefaring species. "Why?" asked the delegate from the synthesis. They were a hive-mind species, thousands of small creatures sharing one consciousness. They considered themselves the most intelligent beings in the galaxy. "Why hide such power? Why pretend to be weak?" Smiled sadly. "When we first came to the stars, we hoped to find friends. Instead, we found empires built on conquest. We saw species enslaved, worlds destroyed, wars that lasted centuries." He paused. "We realized that if we showed our strength, we would be forced to use it. Other species would see us as a threat. They would attack us before we could attack them." "So you chose to appear weak," the Assembly Prime said. "We chose to appear peaceful. We are peaceful. We do not want war. We do not want to conquer anyone." His voice became harder. "But we also will not allow our people to be murdered while we do nothing." The delegates stood. They were the galaxy's most feared warriors. Their empire had conquered dozens of species through pure military strength. They were massive creatures, covered in thick armor and natural weapons. Everyone expected them to be angry, to threaten revenge, to challenge humanity. Instead, the delegate bowed his head in respect. "The Dominion recognizes humanity as equals," he announced. "We will not seek conflict with your species. We request peaceful relations." The chamber gasped. They never backed down, never admitted weakness, never bowed to anyone. But they were not stupid. They had seen the recording. They knew what humanity could do. One by one, other delegates made similar statements. The synthesis declared that their calculations showed war with humanity was not logical. The collective expressed desire for scientific cooperation. Even the smaller species, those who had no power or influence, suddenly spoke with new respect when addressing the human ambassador. Listened to it all with a neutral expression. When everyone had spoken, he raised his hand for silence. "I appreciate your words," he said, "but I want to be clear about something. Humanity does not want your fear. We do not want to rule the galaxy. We do not want to replace one set of conquerors with another." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegate. "What we want is simple. We want our people to be safe. We want peace, true peace, not the fake peace where powerful species do whatever they want while everyone else suffers." Pulled out a small device and activated it. A holographic document appeared above his head, visible to everyone in the chamber. "This is a proposal for a new galactic agreement. We call it the Covenant of Worlds. It would outlaw wars of conquest. It would guarantee protection for civilians of all species. It would create a joint defense force to respond to threats against any member." The delegates stared at the document in shock. "You want to protect everyone?" the delegate asked, "even species that are not human?" "Especially those species. We have the power to destroy. We have demonstrated that, but power without purpose is just violence." His voice softened. "We want to use our power to build something better, a galaxy where no child has to fear being bombed while they sleep, where no colony has to wonder if today is the day they die." The delegate spoke again. "And if we refuse, if we choose to continue as before?" His eyes hardened. "Then you will face the consequences of that choice. We will not attack anyone who has not attacked us, but we will protect those who cannot protect themselves, and we will never again ignore the suffering of innocents." The chamber fell silent again. The delegates looked at each other, uncertain. For thousands of years, the galaxy had operated on a simple rule: the strong took what they wanted, and the weak suffered. Humanity was offering something different, something that had never existed before. "The Assembly will need time to consider this proposal," the Assembly Prime finally said. "Of course," bowed slightly, "but I encourage you to consider it carefully. The thought they could kill our people without consequences. They were wrong. We do not wish to make more examples, but we will if we must." He turned and walked toward the exit. At the door, he paused and looked back. 300 years ago, a human leader said something that has guided us ever since. He said, "If you want peace, prepare for war." We prepared. We hoped we would never need what we built. But when they murdered 12,000 of our people, including children, we had no choice. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Choose wisely, honored delegates. Choose peace. Choose justice. Choose a future where your children and ours can live without fear." He paused. "Or choose war, and learn what humanity becomes when our families are threatened." He left the chamber. Behind him, the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in stunned silence. That night on 1,200 different worlds, emergency meetings continued. Military leaders studied the battle recordings again and again, looking for weaknesses in human tactics. They found none. Scientists analyzed the weapon that destroyed the moon. They could not understand how it worked. They could not imagine how to defend against it. Politicians calculated the costs of war with humanity. Every calculation ended the same way: total defeat. And slowly, one by one, the species of the galaxy began to accept a new reality. Humanity was no longer the joke of the stars. Humanity was the most dangerous species in existence. And they wanted peace. For the first time in galactic history, the powerful were not threatening the weak. The powerful were offering to protect them. It was terrifying. It was confusing. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced. And it was exactly what humanity had planned for 300 years. 3 months after the war, Doctor walked through the streets of the capital city. She was a scientist who studied how different species thought and felt. Before the war, her job had been difficult. Alien species did not take humans seriously. They would not share their thoughts or feelings with creatures they considered weak. Now her job was impossible for a completely different reason. A young child walked toward her on the street. The child's crystal body sparkled in the sunlight, beautiful and innocent. When the child saw, it stopped. Its parent grabbed its arm and pulled it away quickly, whispering something could not hear. But she knew what the parent was saying. She had heard it many times before. Stay away from the humans. They are dangerous. They can destroy moons. Sighed and continued walking. Everywhere she went, she saw the same thing. Merchants refused to charge her for goods, afraid of giving offense. Government officials answered her questions instantly, their voices trembling. Even scientists, who should have been curious and open, kept their distance and spoke in short, nervous sentences. Humanity had wanted respect. They had gotten fear instead. That evening, she sent her weekly report to Admiral. "The situation is the same everywhere," she wrote. "Other species are treating us like monsters. Parents hide their children when humans walk past. Politicians agree with everything we say, not because they believe it, but because they are terrified of disagreeing. We have gone from being laughed at to being feared. Neither is what we wanted." Read the report in her quarters aboard the Unspoken. She was tired. 3 months of managing the aftermath of war had aged her 10 years. She thought about the battle often. 612 ships destroyed. Thousands of lives ended in 14 minutes. She had given the orders. She had watched them die on her. It was necessary, she knew that. They had murdered innocent people. They had targeted children. They would have killed millions more if humanity had not stopped them. But necessity did not make it easier to sleep at night. On Earth, the reaction was even more complicated. General Shin faced questions he had never expected to answer. For 45 years, he had built humanity's secret military in silence. Nobody knew, nobody questioned, nobody protested. Now everyone knew, and half the planet was horrified. Protests erupted in Seoul, in New York, in Mumbai, in Cairo. Millions of people marched through the streets, demanding answers. "How could you build weapons in secret?" they asked. "How could you hide this from your own people? Are we a democracy or a military state?" Politicians demanded investigations. Journalists dug into classified files. Families of soldiers who had served in the Hidden Fleet came forward with stories they had been forced to keep secret for decades. Watched the protests from his bunker. He understood their anger. In a way, he shared it. For 300 years, humanity had lied to itself. They had told themselves they were peaceful. They had believed they were different from the conquering empires of the galaxy. They had imagined themselves as the good ones, the kind ones, the ones who chose diplomacy over violence. And all that time, they had been building weapons capable of destroying moons. Were they really peaceful, or were they just conquerors who had not started conquering yet? Did not have an answer. He was just a soldier who had followed orders and done his duty. The philosophers and politicians would have to figure out the rest. Captain Myra Song, now promoted to Commodore, visited the memorial on New. The colony had been rebuilt in the months since the attack. New buildings stood where old ones had been destroyed. New parks covered the ground where bombs had fallen. Life was returning to normal. But 12,000 names were carved into a wall of black stone. 12,000 people who would never come back. Myra stood before the wall for a long time. She read names. Some were old, some were young, many were very, very young. She had fired some of the first shots in the war. She had watched ships burn. She had helped demonstrate humanity's terrible power to the galaxy. She did not feel like a hero. She felt like a survivor, someone who had lived through something awful and come out the other side changed forever. "Commodore Song." She turned. A young man in a naval uniform stood behind her. He was barely more than a boy, with dark eyes and a serious face. "I am Ensign," he said. I have been assigned to your ship." "Welcome aboard, Ensign." Myra turned back to the memorial. "Do you know why I come here?" "To remember the dead. To remember why we fight." Myra touched one of the names on the wall. Her name was Park. She was 7 years old. She wanted to be a dancer when she grew up. Her voice caught slightly. She never got the chance. Was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised her. "Commodore, I have been thinking a lot about what we did. We built weapons that can destroy moons. We did it because we had to, because the galaxy is dangerous and we needed to protect ourselves." He paused. "But now we have to prove we are more than our weapons. Otherwise, what did we save?" Myra looked at him. He was so young, so earnest, so worried about doing the right thing. "What would you have us do, Ensign?" "I do not know," admitted. "But I know that power means nothing without wisdom. We showed the galaxy we can destroy. Now we need to show them we can build. We need to be more than just the species that erases moons." Myra smiled sadly. "You are wise beyond your years, Ensign. I learned it from my grandmother. She survived the first colony attacks decades ago. She always said that revenge is easy, but healing is hard." He looked at the names on the wall. "I think we owe these people more than just revenge. We owe them a better future." Admiral read the transcript of that conversation in her quarters. It had been included in Commodore Song's weekly report, flagged as significant. The boy was right, she realized. Barely old enough to shave, had understood something that took her decades to learn. Power alone was not enough. They had power. They had power. Every empire in the galaxy had power, and all that power had created was suffering. Humanity could be different. They could use their strength not to conquer, but to protect, not to destroy, but to build, not to dominate, but to heal. It would be hard, harder than building fleets in secret, harder than destroying enemy ships, harder than erasing moons. But it was the only path worth taking. She opened a new message and began to write. To the Galactic Assembly, to the leaders of Earth, to everyone who was asking what humanity would do with its power. "We have demonstrated what we can destroy," she wrote. "Now let us demonstrate what we can create." It was time for humanity to show the galaxy what they really were. Not monsters, not conquerors, just people, flawed, frightened, hopeful people, trying their best to build something good in a dangerous universe. The question was whether the galaxy would let them, and whether they would let themselves.